So if you've been around the web a little bit this week, you've probably noticed there's been a heck of a lot of discussion around games journalism. Now, before this entire story and discussion exploded onto the internet, there was a discussion around one image and one article that sparked this entire thing. That image is of Jeff Keighley, a rather well-known games journalist. But it's not any ordinary image. On both sides, he's flanked by numerous advertisements for Doritos, Halo 4, and Mountain Dew. Heck, even the background is color coordinated to the products. The most striking thing about the image, though, is the expression on Jeff's face. Or possibly the correct way of saying it would be the lack of expression. The look on his face is really just dead. There's nothing there. But we have this extremely striking image. So there goes a writer by the name of Rob Florence. When this all went down, Rob Florence was a writer for Eurogamer. Now the article Rob writes for Eurogamer is called A Table of Doritos, Lost Humanity. Basically, he draws a connection from this picture to post events of the GMA Awards, Games Media Awards, and how quote-unquote games journalists have become much too cozy with the PR people of game developers. Here's a quote from Florence's article to give you a little bit of an impression of the tone that this article had. Publishers are well aware that some of you go crazy if a new AAA title gets a crappy review score on a website, and they use that knowledge to keep the boat from rocking. Everyone has a nice, easy ride if the review scores are decent and the content of games is never challenged. Websites get their exclusives, ad revenue keeps rolling in, the information is controlled, everyone stays friendly. It's a steady flow of Mountain Dew pouring from the hills of the moneymen, down through the fingers of weary journos, down into your mouths. At some point, you will have to stop drinking that stuff and demand something better. Now, the specific post event that raised a bit of controversy was that journalists, people who are supposed to be reporting the news, were able to tweet a hashtag GMA Defiance to advertise for a new game, and they would be randomly selected to win a new PS3. Obviously, this raises a minefield of concerns when it comes to journalistic integrity and conflicts of interest when you're a public figure supposed to be reporting the news, but end up advertising a game for your own public gain. Now, quite a few people raised their concerns about the obvious conflicts of interest that this raised for journalists, but when they raised their concerns, they were met with responses as being bitter or overly critical of just doing a little hashtag on your public Twitter to win a PS3. There was one journalist in particular who goes by the name of Lauren Wainwright, who was particularly vocal in her defense of being able to use her occupation to win free swag. Her Twitter was also plastered with advertisements for the new upcoming Tomb Raider game, and she said that's because she's a tremendous fan of the game. However, though, because the internet's the internet, someone managed to dig up that she currently works for Square Enix, the publisher of Tomb Raider. That's for you to come to your own conclusion about what that's about. But, to get back on track, that's the second figure in our story here. So, Rob Florence writes this very well-written and articulate article slamming the games industry and naming several journalists in particular that were on the point of the spear. And of course, as you'd expect, being professionals, these journalists wrote a well-written, articulate, and convincing article about why he was wrong and defending themselves. Oh, wait. No, this card says they tried to sue him. So, legal threats were sent to Eurogamer in a very short amount of time, and then they pulled the parts of the article that named certain journalists. Consequently, after having his article edited, Rob Florence decided to step down or be fired from Eurogamer. It's not quite clear. Now, this caused a controversy explosion in the games journalism industry. Basically, every single person that had a voice or could post on a site had something to say and wrote their own take on this event. And even ironically, if they just let the people talk about what they wanted to talk about and didn't remove any information, this would have been nothing. Everybody could have just stuck up their noses at Rob and continued on with their day and getting more Doritos, Mountain Dew, and free PS3s. But by actively acknowledging that something had been said and trying to remove the information, everybody got curious. The Streisand effect really came into its own. And when I say everyone wrote an article about it, I almost literally mean everyone wrote an article about it. Even reporters that barely ever cover games have been throwing their 2 cents into the ring. Because there's so much opinion out there and everyone is writing about this, and I doubt you want to crawl through 500 news articles saying almost the identical same thing, I think I'll wrap up some of the important points of this story. One of the most important things about this story is it raises the question once again of what is ethical when it comes to games journalism. Now, remove the imagery from your head that this is some sort of post-Cold War, highly sensitive and secretive intelligence operation. No shadowy figure at 3 in the morning is dropping a manila envelope into a trash can and waiting for some other shadowy figure to pick it up a few hours later. This isn't some sort of sexy, secretive, buying off of officials kind of intelligence. Most of this heavy air quote buying off comes in the form of trips and gifts. For instance, a developer publisher might fly out a couple journalists to cover their game, but they go to some sort of muddy ATV park and they get to ride around ATVs and have fun, it's a blast, and then they take them to a 5-star hotel, they go out, get drinks, have a bunch of fun, and then maybe at the end of the day they get to play a press demo that's very limited and gives them very little information about the actual game. Now, these sort of events are more often than not enough to sway over most journalists to having a positive opinion about the game. Now, I think we can quite fairly agree that these type of thing can be frowned upon. Well, really, that's a gross oversimplification of what this process actually is. Developers and publishers aren't just handing over money to journalists to get a good review. They're slowly trying to influence a person's opinion so they're less willing to write a negative review or have negative things to say about a certain product. Some of these things might include review embargoes, free games, early access, trips, or special events. But even then, not all those things are black and white. For instance, most journalists get their games for free. But let's say that you're putting out a review from Monday to Friday, every single week, every single month, for years. That's a lot of money to go through. Especially if you're working on YouTube, say, and not some massive multi-million-dollar corporation that can just buy the games for you. That's a huge chunk of your profits lost, and it takes away from special things that you can put on for your subscribers, like better shows with the more time you have, higher production quality with the more money and more things you can buy, or even getting giveaway things for your subscribers on a special live stream event. So do we just write off that any journalist can get any game for free since it takes out of their profits? Well, that raises several other questions, like what the heck is a journalist? Is a person that records their voice and edits together some footage and puts it on YouTube, are they considered a journalist? Is a freelance writer that goes to events and interviews developers a journalist? Is an economist who works for the Wall Street Journal but's never played a game before, gets 80 free copies of a game, is that considered a journalist? This situation is even further complicated by that anyone can get their voice out there at any time to any audience with the what some people refer to as the new media generation. And even if for some inexplicable reason we're able to define a journalist across every single board or case, then who gets free games? Is it only people who don't have enough money for it that work on YouTube? Or is it people that work for a giant industry? Then what about the price of games and how many they get? Say if it's a multiplayer game that requires 80 people to play, so they send 80 copies to a journalist, but he only needs one because their servers are live, so he has 79 free copies to give away to his friends. But let's say for whatever hypothetical reason that a reviewer doesn't have access to the servers when they're reviewing that game, but for some reason they have access to 80 friends, then they need those copies to get an accurate review of the game. And keep in mind, this is just free games, probably one of the least controversial topics of this entire list that things journalists get. There's still flights, hotels, getting paid for coverage, embargoes, reviews, early access, a whole slew of things which may or may not be considered getting paid off for your opinion. The best piece of advice I could give you, not only for considering game reviews, but also for real life, is think critically. Don't just be a mushy piece of dough that believes whatever you hear and is formed by the opinions of others. Why might this person have this opinion? What might be their possible reasons for it? Why might they be covering this game instead of this one? Do they have solid objective evidence to support their points? Do they have a long and mysterious history with this developer or publisher? Always think for yourself and don't let others think for you. But you're not going to get 100% access to all the information that goes into these kind of things. So in part, you need to assess the character of the person you're watching and find people that you think are trustworthy and watch their stuff. And not just the sites that you like, but the actual authors of the material you're consuming. So not just, I like X site has a lot of people that write for it and a lot of different opinions. Find the actual author that wrote the stuff that you like. Additionally, one of the important things is to hold people accountable if they start to slip. Don't just stand around and be another drop in the ocean when someone has done something reprehensible that you think they should pay for. But the flip side of that is actually have good evidence and good reasoning of when you're calling people out. Don't just throw around baseless accusations if you want to be taken seriously. While it's critical to remember not to follow the hive mind when defending people, it's also important to remember not to follow the hive mind when attacking people. Almost anyone can throw together a seemingly reasonable report of something that happened. Your best defense is think for yourself, think critically, and think often. There's a lot of monetary gain to be made out there by individuals if you just sit there like a piece of dough being molded by everyone else. Well, that was a rather lengthy and depressing topic for some people, I'm sure, but because it is quite applicable to last week's story on IGN, and it is applicable to this site that you're watching right now, as well as me covering games, I felt like it was something that needed to be covered and is extremely appropriate. So although this was a bit more on the serious side, I appreciate you sticking with it this long. It is something that is very important if you're a consumer of games to be knowledgeable about the industry which you're throwing your money into. But that about does it for this video. Thank you for watching. If you found it informative, fun, or just killed a couple minutes, I would really appreciate your like and favorite. If not, then leave me a comment letting me know why. As always though, this is Homunculus Gaming, and I'll see you next time.